Now, some quick brand news on a big brand launch. Sony Mobile's Vice President of Middle East and Africa recently in the country to launch the new hero product, the Xperia Z1. As you'll see, Sony's strategy is to create a digital ecosystem where televisions, fridges, cameras and mobile phones all work as one.
The Xperia Z1 is now our new hero product, and this is actually another step up to the already very successful on a global level Xperia Z with the perfect camera, as we said. This is next leap with a new G-lens sensor with a software engine which gives you much more bright, full and real color displays. And top of that is a really beautiful design. It's again waterproof with the triluminous display. So I would say from the feature set point of view, it's the best what you can currently get. From the market size point of view, South Africa is almost the biggest one in Middle East and Africa. And the interesting thing in the South African market is that the growth on the smartphone markets is really double digit. It's growing much faster than in other markets. That's the reason we as a smartphone manufacturer also looking into this market, how we can develop it. And if you look into the market data and the GfK data in the last 12 months, we had a steady growth, a healthy growth in the market, and the people accepting the Sony brand here in the market. This makes us very proud. The smartphone is going now in the center of the life of the human being. I mean, it's about information sharing, it's about connectivity of all devices you have, if it is TV, if it is PlayStation, digital still cameras. This is what we call widely the ecosystem. And this is playing an important role in the daily life. It's not only about anymore, like 10 years ago, sending an SMS and maybe make a voice call. It's much, much more what a mobile devices now bringing to the daily life of a human being.
So, as you can see, interconnected devices are certainly the way of the future, and that would be one big brand trend for 2014. I'd suggest that brands that are not using technology optimally are dead in the water. Let's look at that now in a little bit more detail, and with me is Rosie Hawkins, Head of Branding and Communication at the big global research company TNS. A very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us. I would say to you that brands don't necessarily understand the power of mobile and they're not harnessing it sufficiently. Am I just being an old grouch here?
No, I think you're right. Mobile presents a very new and very different opportunity for brands, and I think there's been a temptation to look at the internet as just a new surface to place advertising. The press ad just goes on a banner, the TV ad just goes on YouTube. And in fact, it's a very different medium. People are using it in a different way. And particularly in developing and rapid growth economies, it's the first access that people have to the internet. And brands need to understand that and develop their approaches accordingly.
We'll talk about approach and strategy in just a moment, but none of this is true unless you have optimum connection speed, which is always a problem, certainly in this country.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And one of the other factors that faces consumers, of course, is the cost of data. So there's speed and cost. And certainly here in South Africa, the data costs are still quite high relative to other countries in the world. And there's a lot of prepaid customers as well. So actually lowering those market barriers are going to be critical to really harnessing the mobile opportunity.
But having said that, it doesn't mean that brands shouldn't be playing in this space. So very broadly, what recommendations about formulating a mobile brand strategy?
I think one of the interesting things is to start from mobile, because that's the way that so many people are now accessing brands and accessing the internet, particularly, as I've said, in emerging economies. Just simple things like optimizing your website for mobile, understanding how people use mobile. And very often it's in the moment, very often it's people looking for local information. So it's simple things like making sure that the telephone number's clear, that you can click through to it, having easy access to maps so people know where they're looking. Because a lot of local searches will lead to phone calls, which will lead to transactions. So we need to make it as easy as for the consumer as possible.
Is the creative execution any different? You know, we have this phrase in your industry called dwell time. In other words, the amount of time that people are actually engaging with it. You've got to think differently in a creative way.
Definitely. And I think one of the things I'd encourage clients to do is to think more about, you know, the big idea as a creative space, and then think about how best to execute that idea in different channels. And the way that you execute on mobile is going to be different from the way that you do online, is going to be different in the way that you do in the traditional media channels. So I do think it's about starting with the idea and then really optimizing for the individual channel.
Often where brands fail, though, is that there isn't that seamless thread between the different platforms.
Yes.
If you say that starting with mobile is important, that puts a lot of pressure on the other platforms to get in line?
Well, I think I'm thinking particularly about the internet interface. And so that's what I believe needs to be mobile first. I think from a creative perspective, you're absolutely right. It's about creating coherence, not necessarily consistency. It's not about a cookie cutter approach where everything looks the same, but it's providing coherence across all of the different touch points so that however people experience the brand, it's all laddering up to the overall idea and the overall brand essence.
Leads me to this thing called location-based marketing.
Yeah.
You walk into a shopping mall, you will be directed to a place. That certainly is something where mobile has a huge role to play.
It certainly does, and I think to your point about creativity, this is an area where brands can really get quite creative. In markets where we still have a lot of feature phones, and South Africa still has quite a lot of feature phones, we've been very reliant on SMS, we've been very reliant on USSD, and that really means vouchers, it means promotions. But as smartphone penetration increases, and it's up at around 54% here in South Africa, there opens up a world of creativity. And as people walk into store, you can target messages, you can be far more creative in the way that you interact with them.
Good talking to you, Rosie Hawkins from TNS visiting South Africa. Finally this week, here's an agency that is really going the extra mile for its client. The agency's space here in Johannesburg literally let one of their clients move into their office in order to give consumers an up-close and personal experience. Let's go behind the scenes.
Dickies approached Space to help them reposition themselves as a more fashionable and accessible brand. Space willingly embraced this exciting opportunity. Dickies is a brand well known for its durable workwear and strong ties to the Pansula culture. So, how does one change the perception of a brand so deeply rooted in its heritage and culture? By creating an environment where both the retail buyers and consumers could see for themselves the Dickies brand as they had never seen it before. What better environment to communicate this change than up-and-coming, hip and trendy Braamfontein? Making use of the agency's reception area, the idea was to transform the space into the first ever South African Dickies pop-up store. Conceptualization began to ensure that the design of the store, the event, and each and every touch point in between would demonstrate that the Dickies brand is fashionably tough. The transformation began and soon sparked much anticipation and excitement about the area's newest addition. The first ever Dickies only retail space opened its doors to buyers, celebrities, and media from across the country. The range was well received, and after a successful launch, the store was opened to the public. The shop attracted attention from all over the area and sold almost double its target for the day, proving that Dickies is fashionably tough.
Next week, we'll bring you a South African television exclusive with the man behind Barack Obama's online campaign, Harper Reid. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
News that moves. ENCA.com.